Welcome everybody to another episode of Fins Nation. I am your host, Louis Sung, and today we're going to be discussing the fact that the Miami Dolphins are finally going to be making their first picks of the 2023 NFL Draft. We all sat through the first round watching and waiting to see if Chris Grier would pull off something crazy, to see if maybe the Miami Dolphins would find a way to get back into the first round to pick a guy that they felt would help them win in 2023 right now. Obviously, that did not happen. We watched all of these prospects get picked. But there is still something interesting here to discuss, because there were some players that were picked in the first round last night that were actually very shocking that they were picked as early as they were. Obviously, one of the biggest things was that the Detroit Lions actually drafted Jahmyr Gibbs with the 12th overall pick. So while the idea of Jahmyr Gibbs being a first-round pick is not exactly a foreign one, the fact that it was picked so early, when a lot of people thought, at least earlier on during the draft process, that he could somehow fall to Miami at 51, no, the Detroit Lions decided to take all of that and say, nope, we're picking him right now. And then Detroit went and did it again with the 18th overall pick by picking linebacker Jack Campbell, who a lot of Miami Dolphins fans also thought might potentially be a possibility to trade up later in the second round to go and get him. So all of this stuff is going on, and now the Miami Dolphins find themselves in a very interesting situation, because now there are some very good players that are now going into the second round that might potentially be available for them to pick at 51 overall instead of going in the first round. So all of this does, it just shakes up the entire draft process, and now even picks that we thought would be obvious are now no longer set in stone. And we're going to get into all of that. But before that, really quick, just want to go ahead and mention that, as always, this show is brought to you by You Brake Wheel Fix. You Brake Wheel Fix is the complete automotive wheel solution. Ever parked too close to the sidewalk curb? You Brake Wheel Fix specializes in the repair of damaged wheels from bends, cracks, or curb rash. Or maybe your wheels are faded or peeling. You don't need to replace them, as You Brake Wheel Fix can refinish them to like new. Offering complete refinished options through powder coating, machining, and polishing, You Brake Wheel Fix is the answer to all of your wheel needs. And if you're just looking to give your ride a new look, You Brake Wheel Fix also offers many car customizing options, such as new custom wheels and tires from your favorite brands, performance upgrades, window tinting, and suspension modifications. Located just south of Aventura, you can reach Mark and his staff at 305-748-0112 or online at youbrakewheelfix.com. They are really active on all social media platforms at You Brake Wheel Fix, so shoot them a DM on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter and get an estimate in just minutes. So don't delay, go to You Brake Wheel Fix and start customizing your ride to show off your Dolphins fandom today. This show is also brought to you by PrizePicks.com. PrizePicks.com is a revolutionary fantasy platform where you can now pick up to 6 different players across professional sports leagues. Whether that's the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, one of each, it's up to you to decide. All you have to do is choose whether your chosen player will get more or less than their projected stat. They give you free squares over there at Taco Tuesdays. They always have special Taco Tuesday promotions every single Tuesday. And today happens to be Flex Friday, where today you will either get your money back if you happen to lose, or you can possibly multiply the amount of money you can normally win. So with offers like that, it's hard to justify not signing up at this point if you're any kind of a fantasy fan. So use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up using our promo code. So, just to recap, use that promo code 5. Sign up using that promo code. And if you deposit $100, PrizePicks will literally give you $100 of their dollars for you to play with, first, absolutely free. So once again, you're basically getting a free $100 for signing up using our promo code if you deposit $100 when you sign up. So again, that's prizepicks.com. That's the promo code 5, FIVE. Get started winning today. All right, so let's talk about some of the notable things that happened during the first round, shall we? So probably the most interesting storyline of all is the fact that Will Levis obviously did not get drafted in the first round. There were plenty of opportunities for QB needy teams to pick him, and they all just went ahead and they said, nope, no thank you. Maybe it was the toe injury that he had, maybe it's the fact that he puts mayonnaise in his coffee, who knows. But nevertheless, Will Levis is going to be a second round quarterback now, and this big-armed QB out of Kentucky is now going to find himself in a very embarrassing situation because he got all dressed up and he didn't have anywhere to go. So who's going to take him now? Obviously, it's not going to be the Miami Dolphins, which we all know and we are very happy for because, quite frankly, I don't think they should be using pick 51 on a quarterback anyway. But besides him, there are other quarterbacks that are available that some people thought would go in the first round. And so now the Miami Dolphins find themselves in a very unique situation. What team is going to try to go up there and try to make it so that they're going to get their quarterback? Or maybe they just feel like Will Levis would be worth the investment in the second round. But all that does is that it just pushes one player that the Miami Dolphins could potentially have even further down. For instance, only one tight end went in the first round when there was expected to be at least two. So Dalton Kincaid went to the Buffalo Bills, and just to be fair, just to be real about this sort of thing, even though the Buffalo Bills drafted Dalton Kincaid, it's already a dangerous offense to begin with. We know this. So Dalton Kincaid adds an extra wrinkle that the Miami Dolphins are going to have to be wary of. Thankfully, they have a reloaded defense with some amazing players on it. They still have David Long Jr. that they just added. Jalen Ramsey is obviously on the team. Xavier Howard is still there. Javon Holland is there. Jalen Phillips is there. Bradley Chubb is there. They kept Emmanuel Ogbah. Zach Sealer and Christian Wilkins are still going to be there. So it's a very loaded defense. Oh, and by the way, did I happen to mention that Vic Fangio is the best defensive coordinator in the modern era of the NFL? So forgive me if I'm not dropping everything to talk about how scared I am of the Buffalo Bills. They're still a good team. I respect the hell out of them. But I'm not going to be looking at these Buffalo Bills and saying, oh, you know what? The gap has just been reopened between Buffalo and Miami. The AFC East is still very much up for grabs, and I refuse to hear anything different. Now, as for some of the other players that are actually available in the second round, there's obviously one Notre Dame tight end, Michael Mayer, Penn State cornerback Joey Porter. There's Alabama defensive back Brian Branch. Brian Branch in particular is very interesting because the Miami Dolphins are in need of another safety. Not in the sense that they don't have some good ones already. Obviously, Brandon Jones being there is a big deal, but Brandon Jones is limited in what he can do. He's a very good in-the-box safety, but he's not somebody that you necessarily want covering tight ends or running backs or whoever happens to be out there. So there is something limited there. And Vic Fangio, who is notorious for having an incredible coverage scheme, obviously, they are going to want somebody who can get the job done. And Vic Fangio is probably looking at Brian Branch and saying, hey, if this guy keeps falling the way he is, I would want the Miami Dolphins to go up there and get him for my defense because I can do some amazing things with him. And I would understand why he would want that to happen. This defense is pretty much all set up. Maybe there's only a couple more pieces here and there that they would really need to get filled up. I would argue they need another linebacker, but if you really want to shore up that secondary, if you want to get the job completely finished up, because that's really like one of the only main quote-unquote holes left. It's linebacker, but only in the sense that they have a little more depth that's needed, or the safety position, because you're not 100% sure about the guy who's going to be starting as of right now. So you have either Deshaun Elliott or Brandon Jones or some other guys that might be available, but they're not like set in stone, so to speak. If you could find them an upgrade, I'm sure the Dolphins would love to be able to do that. Now, another factor to take into account, and we'll go ahead and go back to this whole tight end situation, Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame is still on the board, and many draft pundits like Matt Miller and at NFL Draft Scout on Twitter consider him one of the best players in this draft. He was considered a first rounder by his standards, and so he hasn't been drafted yet. So once again, we're looking at this situation, and I suggested this on yesterday's show. Is it possible that with all of these weird little wrinkles in this draft, with all of this strange happenings, do you think that there's possibility that Darnell Washington out of Georgia could possibly fall to the Miami Dolphins? Because if you think about it, it doesn't look like tight end is being viewed as a very important position right now. And so if you could potentially get your hands on somebody like a Darnell Washington, who again would be a absolutely perfect fit for what this offense is trying to do. His blocking is some of the best in this whole tight end class, and he is an absolute beast of a human being. Again, he stands at 6'7". Even forget the blocking part of it. Forget the blocking. If you just threw the ball up in the air, he would just be able to jump up and jump up over everybody else. Tua could throw the ball, seems like 9 feet in the air, and all the dude would have to do is just jump up a little bit, and he could come down with it. That would be an instant touchdown every single time they got into the red zone. And that's, of course, on those snaps that he is not blocking. Because with his blocking, like, let's just say you're stuck with Austin Jackson, right? Let's just say that Austin Jackson becomes the right tackle, and he doesn't do any kind of several improvements. He doesn't become a good starting caliber right tackle. He doesn't even become a decent right tackle. Well, if you have Darnell Washington, then all of a sudden, all you have to do is just give Austin Jackson a little bit of help, and suddenly it's not such a daunting task. Suddenly it doesn't seem so difficult, because Darnell Washington, if there's one thing he knows how to do, it is block. Yes, he comes out of his routes slowly, but you know what? So does Durham Smythe, and we just extended him. So we have an opportunity to grab a guy who can easily take over and be the better player on offense, because Darnell Washington has some untapped potential as a pass catcher, and he's even bigger than Durham Smythe. So I'm absolutely taking him if by some miracle Darnell Washington makes it all the way to 51. But all these moves that have happened in the first round, again, a lot of stuff has happened here, a lot of confusing things. There were some players that we thought for sure would go some places, and they were correct. So we all expected Bryce Young to go number 1 overall. We all expected CJ Stroud to go next. Now, as for the whole Will Levis versus Anthony Richardson thing, some people were shocked by that. So the 4th overall pick was Anthony Richardson and not Will Levis. And a lot of people were thinking that Will Levis was a lock to go to the Indianapolis Colts. So now, again, once there's a quarterback that falls out of the first round, suddenly it becomes a ticking time bomb. Which is the team that's going to end up picking him? And what team is going to pick him and let another prospect that the Miami Dolphins could potentially want all the way down to 51? Every time something weird happens, it just becomes much more likely that the Dolphins could pick up somebody that they actually want. So reaches like Jack Campbell or Jahmyr Gibbs for the Detroit Lions, that just opens the door for some more interesting things. And we are going to get into some of those players. Now, obviously, Darnell Washington is number 1 on my list, and is number 1 on the list of a lot of Miami Dolphins fans. But there are some interesting players that are falling here. So let's take, for instance, Joey Porter Jr. Joey Porter Jr. is a cornerback that has a lot of fantastic skills, and we know the Miami Dolphins really love their secondary players, right? We just talked all about the Alabama safety, but there's also the possibility that Miami could double down on the cornerback position. Now, this is something that I talked about during the live stream last night. Obviously, the Miami Dolphins already have plenty of corners available. They obviously just traded for Jalen Ramsey. They have Xavier Howard. Nick Needham is coming back from his injury. You have Trill Williams coming back from his injury. Kader Kohu is still there. So it looks like they're set at cornerback. Or are they? Keep in mind the situation the Miami Dolphins found themselves in last season. Even though they thought they were completely set at cornerback, they thought they had enough depth, within just a few weeks, they found themselves struggling to even have a few starters on hand. So with Kader Kohu, with Trill Williams, Noah Igbenogany was there, it was just pretty much a miserable experience all the way around, because even Xavier Howard, who played most of the games in 2022, he was injured pretty much the whole way, and it knocked him down a peg or two. So with all that in mind, now it's time to get serious with the whole situation. I honestly, at this point, would not be upset if, for some whatever reason, Joey Porter Jr. ended up falling in the draft. Could there be a stigma against him? I don't see why there would be. There's very difficult to figure out why certain players fall the way that they do, because there's a whole list of players that you're looking at and wondering, okay, how come they didn't go in the first round? Why did other players ended up getting drafted ahead of them? And of course, obviously, one of the biggest ones is Will Levis. Joey Porter Jr. is another one. Brian Branch, who we just mentioned, is another one. There's also Keon White. There's some really good players that are available, and the Miami Dolphins are going to have their pick of the litter, it looks like, because it seems very unlikely that every single player on this list is just going to go. There's B.J. Ojulari, an outside linebacker out of LSU. Trenton Simpson, a linebacker out of Clemson. He's available still. Hendon Hooker, he's a quarterback. I don't think the Miami Dolphins have to worry about him, but he is somebody on that list who could potentially lure another team to go ahead and pick him, which would push another one of those players even further down to Miami. Right now, it seems like a given that if they really want Sam Laporta, they can have him. It's not even a question at this point. It's starting to look like that if they really want a Keanu Benton, the Miami Dolphins will pretty much have their choice at him. And a lot of the players that we talked about over the past few days on these shows, it looks like all of them might be available. And that might even include Darnell Washington at this point, because there's been no indication that any other team is particularly interested in a tight end at this point. It took all the way late into the first round to go to the Buffalo Bills before even the consensus top tight end in the whole draft, Dalton Kincaid, was selected. And so again, you have Michael Mayer, who's the next guy in line out of Notre Dame, and he still hasn't even been picked. And the second round starts now. So here you go. What do the Miami Dolphins do? Now they have to rethink their whole draft board. They have to rethink, is this guy going to be available? And if they are, do we decide to pick them over the guy that we thought would be available because we had already started planning for their availability? If I'm the Miami Dolphins, I don't even think twice. With the way things are going right now, I go ahead and just pick best player available and just go with it. I don't care what position it is. If it's a defensive tackle, fine. If it's a tight end, fine. If it's a running back, fine. If it's a wide receiver, fine. Absolutely, go for it. I know that Alfredo Arteaga wants Jonathan Mingo something fierce, and it looks like he's going to be available as well because for whatever reason, it took forever for the wide receivers to start coming off the board. So now the Miami Dolphins, you have a really good opportunity here. Find yourselves a player that can start contributing right now. Don't waste any time. Start getting yourself into this because this season is ripe for the picking, and it's not going to be easy. The AFC East is absolutely loaded, and I still believe the New England Patriots are going to find some way, somehow, to be competitive because that's usually how they do things. If they don't, I'll be very happy. But even if they're not, you still have the Jets to contend with now that Aaron Rodgers is officially a New York Jet, and of course the Buffalo Bills just got stronger, adding Dalton Kincaid to their offense. So we shall see what happens. We're going to be live again for the second round and the third round of the NFL draft. We're going to have a whole lot of folks come in. I'm going to see if I can get my good friend Duke, as in Chris Early. That's his real name, but I call him Duke because that's what I've always called him. He's a really good friend of mine. He had a great time last night when we did the first round. Alfredo Arteaga will probably be on hand again. We're going to try to get some more panelists in there as the Miami Dolphins start making their picks. So make sure that you're tuned in to the 5 Reasons Sports Network because we will be keeping an eye on all this stuff. And we're going to be giving you the commentary as the picks come along. So that's going to be it for this show. Thank you all so much for listening. If you haven't already done so, make sure that you go to prizepicks.com, use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. Again, that's promo code 5, FIVE. Go to prizepicks.com and get yourself started winning today. And of course, go ahead and head over to You Brake Wheel Fix if you want to give your car a significant upgrade. If you need to get your wheels repaired, they've got your back. If you want to get your car looking some real Dolphins colors, they got you with that too. Go to You Brake Wheel Fix, or you can go meet them online at youbrakewheelfix.com. And again, you can always just give them a call as well if you're more of a classic person. All you have to do is call them at 305-748-0112, and you can get an estimate in just minutes. Again, that's You Brake Wheel Fix. Go and check them out today. We will see you all next time for another episode of Fins Nation, where we will be reacting to all the picks that were made in the 2023 NFL Draft.